Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Sasha Brown and I'm the Director of Professional Development at the CFDA. Thank you all so much for joining us today for our webinar, Learning from the Leaders, which is the second in our four-part adaptive fashion series in partnership with Runway of Dreams and Gamut Management. Today, we are once again joined by Mindy Shire, who is the founder of Runway of Dreams and Gamut Management. Runway of Dreams Foundation is a nonprofit organization that works towards a future of inclusion, acceptance, and opportunity in the fashion industry for people with disabilities. The foundation develops, delivers, and supports programs and events that celebrate people's differences, breaks down stereotypes, highlights the need for mainstream adaptive apparel, and showcases people with disabilities in fashion. With the overwhelming amount of requests Mindy received at Runway of Dreams from a multitude of brands and industries for connections to people with disabilities, in 2019, Mindy created Gamut Management to represent people with disabilities and create a marketplace where businesses and industries can connect to this target audience. Gamut is rebranding the way people with disabilities are viewed, marketed to, and represented in the mainstream world. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our panelists today, who are an incredible group of industry leaders from various different fashion brands who are putting their resources behind adaptive fashion. It's my pleasure to introduce Khatija Gaslitwala, who is the Senior Vice President of Technical Design at Tommy Hilfiger Adaptive, Judy Kepsel, who is the Technical Design Manager at Kohl's Kids, Natalie Lee, who is the Senior Design Director at Stride Right, Stacey Monson, who is the Inclusive Design Expert at Target, Gina Smith, who is the Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Head of Global Executive and Creative Recruitment at LVMH, and Dana Zumbo, who is the Zappos Adaptive Business Development Manager at Zappos.com. So before we begin, I just want to quickly remind everyone who's joining us today that we want you all to participate in this conversation. Our experts are eager to answer your questions, so please feel free to submit those via the question box, and we will host the Q&A at the end of the conversation. Now it is my pleasure to hand the conversation over to Mindy Shire.
Thank you, Sasha, and tremendous thank you again to the CFDA for supporting us on this journey and really making this a priority. I am so excited for today's panel to not only be joined by leaders in the adaptive movement, but I've had the pleasure to work with each and every one of these brilliant women and real pioneers within their companies. And I am so excited for you all to listen, learn, and understand how, hopefully, if you attended last week's seminar, you heard from the people themselves, people with all different types of disabilities, about the challenges, and now we are going to hopefully talk about the solutions and things that are being done to solve the problem and really understand the how and why adaptive is so important and will absolutely become another category within the fashion umbrella. As you hopefully know from the last seminar, I am a former fashion designer, but also the mom of a son with muscular dystrophy. So I live this every day. I am joined by some other mothers on this panel who understand exactly what I am talking about, but they are doing this from a personal and professional perspective. And the other thing that I want to address before we go into introducing the panel is that you will hear that there are different entry points to getting involved in the world of adaptive or inclusion of people with disabilities. And each of these amazing companies have taken different entry points, some through a lens of internal, some external, some product driven. So that is, I hope, a takeaway that we're really going to hear and understand from this panel. So without further ado, let's hear from each of the panelists a little bit about who they are and what their role is in their companies. So Judy, I'd love to start with you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mindy. It's such a pleasure to be here. So I'm Judy Kepsel. I'm the Technical Design Manager for Kohl's Kids. I've been at Kohl's for close to 10 years, and during that time, my daughter was diagnosed with a rare genetic syndrome. Shortly after her first birthday, she began to become ill and was admitted to the hospital, but the doctors couldn't figure out, what was making her sick. So like many parents in her situation, I went to Google and started looking up her, different symptoms, and I came across Williams syndrome. It really fit my daughter, and I knew there was a strong possibility that she could have it, but it took 2 weeks in the hospital for the doctors to even consider it as a diagnosis. And it was only when every other possibility had been exhausted. So as it turns out, she does have Williams syndrome, and it was a huge relief to have a diagnosis so that we could properly treat her condition and so she could start to get better. And I really learned from that experience how important it is to advocate for our children and to follow our instincts as parents. So here at Kohl's, we're committed to supporting health and wellness for families, and that includes all families. So and I was so excited when we found out that we were going to launch Adaptive. I felt a strong calling to be involved because I knew there were so many other families like mine that include somebody with a disability or special needs. And I knew with the help of other parents at Kohl's that we could come together and share our experiences and make a positive impact. So we held a focus group and we started talking about our needs for adaptive clothing, and it became clear that the need was great. I had spent mornings trying to shove a shoe over a brace on my daughter's foot and trying to get out the door and thinking, there's got to be a better way to do this. And as it turns out, adaptive is the better way to do it. And anything that can make life a little more functional or a person a little more comfortable or afford a little more independence is worth it. So I'm really honored to be here, Mindy. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Natalie.
Mindy. My name is Natalie Lee. I oversee the design and development of footwear for Stride Right. For those of you that don't know, it's a 102-year-old children's brand. Last year I was fortunate enough to be a part of the launch that we called Project Fits Right, with a sneaker called the Journey, which is a fully adaptable sneaker that comes in multiple widths, and it was designed to accommodate different types of orthotics. Back in 2018, that's when we started the project. We received an email from a customer who really took the time to explain the struggles that she and the families when they go through in finding shoes for children with orthotic needs. As we started our research, we asked a single question on our social media platform, very millennial of us, asking parents of children who wears any types of orthotics to help us build a better adaptable shoe. To everyone's surprise, in 3 days, over 1,600 people emailed us willing to help. Our customers, they filled out a 25 questionnaire survey. They answered all of our product team's questions, from what shoes do they currently wear, what have their parents done to hack the shoes in the past, what are their pain points, what do they want us to understand as a brand. And everyone was so thorough in their response to really help us understand this community. Fast forward, we launched Project Fits Right last July in the middle of a pandemic, and the response has been amazing for us. We started the project selling our leadership with, this may not be the most profitable idea, but this is the right thing to do. And to be able to see our sneaker that we develop with the community as a consistent top bestseller and a top revenue driver for our site, it's been so encouraging and really changing the conversation on what it means to be an inclusive brand. I'm so thankful to be here, Mindy, amongst the talented panelists and to be able to share a little bit of our story. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. And we're definitely going to circle back to that, underscore that it's a top selling sneaker now. Stacey.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be amongst this incredible group of women. My name is Stacey Monson, and I'm an inclusive design leader at Target. During my more than 20-year career, I've had the opportunity to work on all product categories, as well as all gender sizes, so petite plus maternity, and of course, naturally now adaptive. You know, my day job is really focusing on designing for plus size women, which has been really rewarding and has a lot of, you know, unique challenges, very similar to those in adaptive. We launched Target Adaptive in 2017, which was really exciting, followed by Halloween costumes, then followed by sensory-friendly furniture. And so how did I really get involved in all of this? I have an 11-year-old daughter with autism. And so at the age of 7, she was just very tall for her age, and she still wore pull-ups. And I couldn't find anything that would fit her that was functional, fashionable, and represented her style, and that looked like her peers. So I started doing a lot of research and started my own company. And through that process, I just learned how incredibly expensive it was. And of course, your children want to look like their peers. And so Target was this natural platform to, you know, connect and to offer and to share this amazing product that looks like your peers at an accessible price point. So this really became my journey for really ultimately designing adaptive clothing. Kind of on the side, in addition to my passion for fashion, I've also served on a couple of ERG groups within Target, our Targetability Awareness Network, both in a co-chair capacity as well as just a team member. We also started a Parents of Children with Disabilities group, so really tapped into that community to bring to life adaptive, and also partnered with a lot of our school systems here in Minnesota as part of their Special Education Advisory Council. So not only focusing on clothing, but also focusing then on accessible education. And most recently, I serve on a school board, Sparrow Academy, which is a school specifically designed for special needs children. So again, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Stacey. Gina.
Hi, Mindy. Hi. Well, hello, everybody. And thank you so much for having me here. I feel very privileged to be with these incredible women who, as I listen to your stories, it's very touching to see both from a personal and from a professional side. You know, for LVMH, and it's to your initial point, Mindy, there are multiple entry points into how, as an organization, you can work and support people with disabilities. And for LVMH, it really started for us in 2007, and it started in Paris, actually, where we put in processes and procedures in terms of being able to recruit and work with people with disabilities. And that became a core mission for our businesses at the headquarters, at the LVMH headquarters, but also some of our brands that are headquartered in other cities across Europe. And we carried that in North America, specifically with Sephora a number of years ago, who has a very strong program in place. They have approximately 30% of their employees in the distribution centers across North America that are people with disabilities. And they have found that it's been an incredible recruitment mechanism for them, and it's contributed so much to the business because the level of productivity, the level of loyalty, dedication has been incredible from a pure business standpoint. And then also just in terms of from employee engagement, as they have brought these employees in and been able to integrate them into the organization and really create awareness of people with disabilities and the challenges that they face. And also the similarities that each of them also bring, which I think was interesting for our other employees to really embrace and understand. More recently, we've started working with Kenzo US they've been working with a company called Facility to make sure that their websites are accessible to people with disabilities. And then since we've started working with you, Mindy, and some of the work that we've done to educate and inform our employees, Mark Jacobs has now been having meetings with Grace June, who's an educator and the CEO of Open Style Lab. We currently don't have any adaptive wear, but that doesn't mean that we won't. And it is something that our brands are looking at. I think one of the things that, you know, we have a very strong commitment at LVMH towards diversity and inclusion. It's a cornerstone of our business philosophy. It's represented across the geographies that we operate. It's represented across the different brands, the categories, the businesses that we hold. And it's, again, a core philosophy of the group. We support clients and employees around the world. We've been very active as it relates to gender, the LGBT community, people of color, with a focus on Black and African American and Latinx in particular. And again, it's been through the work with you where we really started to understand the needs of the disabled community and the opportunities that we could offer as an organization. And we have been, learning more both from an employee side, but more and more from a business side to see how we can continue to grow and evolve and really incorporate this into our D&I mission as well.
Perfect, thank you. Dana.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Mindy and Gamma Management and this CFDA for giving us the opportunity. I'm honored to be among such an amazing group of thought leaders. My name is Dana Zumbo, and I'm with Zappos. I'm the Business Development Manager on the Zappos Adaptive team. I've been with Zappos now over 12 years and have been part of the Adaptive team from the very beginning. My retail career started over 35 years ago, which is crazy, in the department and specialty retail stores. What I loved most about being within retail, besides the product, was what we're doing here today is really connecting and building relationships, because knowing someday that we would do some amazing things together, and I know that someday is today, so it makes me super excited. Within those years also, I always found myself filling any free time with volunteering and teaching recreational classes for kids and adults with disabilities. After moving to Las Vegas from Miami, before working at Zappos, I decided to go back to school for special education and pursue my passion working with kids. And during that time, I was able to start an adaptive swimming class at one of our local community centers. And I got really involved with the autism community. I even let the kids talk me into coaching them on the Special Olympics regional events up in Tahoe. And those kids today are adults, and yes, I am still invited to all of the birthday parties. They're still a core part of my life. I did find myself missing retail, and then I was introduced to Zappos, and kind of, the rest is history. But I'm so grateful to be able to bring my retail experience and my love of working with people with disabilities together to really make a positive impact in others' lives. It's the most fulfilling work, if you want to call it work, that I have ever been a part of. And as a part of Zappos, a retailer who really prides ourselves on customer service and experience, it is our responsibility to be able to provide footwear and clothing and accessories to everyone.
Thank
So
you.
thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dana. And Khadijah. Oh, you're on mute, Khadijah.
Thank you for this great opportunity, Mindy and team, and the wonderful panel. I work for Tommy, the Senior Vice President. I've been there for 10 years. And I think we were the first one, Tommy, to be inclusive, to start with Adaptive with Mindy's help. Mindy introduced me with the Runway of Dreams. It started as a small project for Mindy, but it changed my life. When I was little, I had myasthenia gravis that affects all the muscles of different parts of the body. And I know how difficult it was, getting emotional, to dress up sometime, because it used to take a lot of trouble. And that time nobody knew disability was a disability. It was, especially when I was growing up in India, it was a very bad thing to be disabled and not be able to dress yourself and all. But I was lucky with medical and treatment, I was able to overcome that disability. So when she came to us as Tommy to start with the first Runway of Dreams, it was a great opportunity for me to be a part of this project with her. And I think she just took me in so much into this whole project that I never stopped. We started with the kid, we launched in 2017, And it just became, from the kids, we took over to the men's and women's based on the demands that we got. We did a lot of focus group and a lot of studies to learn different, because we didn't have any benchmark. So it was all very new to us, and it took a lot of studies and focus groups and all different panelings, all different questionnaires to get to where we are today, and with the product which we have come out, which we keep innovating on. But it was Mindy's great support in this, to me especially, and encouraging me on how to move forward with this. And I think we are, I'm getting very emotional with this.
You're making me emotional too. Delete the pad, Khadijah, please.
And recently, my brother-in-law had a kid who is a hydrocephalus baby. So putting all this together, it just was like, I'm doing the right thing. And with my sister in India, we've started a group where we've taken all the disabled people over there in small villages, and we've helped them to develop a skill where they can earn on their own. And we started with about like 20 to 30 people, and today we have 5,000, including 50 villages in India. So I mean, it's a great opportunity which we are growing, and now they're earning on their own with doing crochet and knitting and all that, and they're earning, which is giving them the livelihood. So Mindy, thank you.
Thank you, Khadijah. So thank you everybody so much for giving us that beautiful overview. And now we're gonna kind of get a little bit more targeted so that our audience can have some takeaways, some tools, and hopefully understand that this can be done, and you are all proving it. Dana, I'd like to start with you. Being, you know, a leading online retailer at Zappos.com, I know that one of my favorite things about Zappos is that you call yourselves a customer service company that happens to sell shoes and clothing. With almost 1 billion people on our planet who have a disability, that's right, everybody, 1 billion, you have a story that I believe that you can share, that you were in a crossroads, or Zappos was in a crossroads of not being able to fulfill getting people products that they needed.
So as Mindy mentioned, Zappos has always prided themselves on being a customer service and experience company, and that's really the foundation of Zappos, and Zappos Adaptive is an extension of that. And the way that Zappos Adaptive started was actually from a customer phone call, similar to what Natalie said about Stride Right. And Tanya called in to return a pair of shoes for her grandson because they didn't work for him. And Saul, who took the call, was listening to her, and he sensed that she was very frustrated because she couldn't find something that worked for him. And as they started to, as he started to ask questions and just be curious about what she needs for her grandson, she had shared with him that Gabriel has autism. He has limited dexterity, and he's unable to tie shoelaces. And he was moving from kid sizes to adult sizes, and this was 7 years ago. There were not as many options as there are today. And Saul said, no problem, let me check our site. We carry breadth of assortment. And sadly, he could not find something that worked for Gabriel. So it was that one customer call that really was the catalyst for the idea of really asking ourselves one question: how do we serve all customers? And that's really how it started. We did a lot of research, talked to a lot of people with disabilities, families with kids who have disabilities, to make sure that we understood, is there a challenge, a problem out there that we could help solve? We knew that we had a passionate team of people that we brought together, but we also had the entire company of Zappos behind us, supporting us to help make this come to fruition. And in April of 2017, very similar to the time frame where all of you kind of entered into the space, we launched our website, Zappos Adaptive, which is a curated shopping experience. And our tagline is simply functional and fashionable products to make life easier.
Perfect, thank you. Stacey, I'm curious, did you have a similar reaction within Target in terms of being able to service all customers? Or you guys have a special name for them? Clients, what do we call them?
Oh, Target, we call them guests.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
Yes.
To be able to service all guests.
Yes. So it much like the stories we've heard, it does start with a story. And so, you know, obviously I had my own personal story trying to find a solution for my daughter, but there are actually several other women and team members who are also encountering similar challenges. And so when we found out that we were all thinking about the same thing, we came together, we built out a business plan. We talked with families. It's so incredibly important to connect with families, because if you don't have that lived experience, you think you're solving a problem, but that problem might not even be what the real issue is. And so really being able to connect with various people. So we talked with children, we talked with adults, we talked with parents, we talked with communities and organizations to really understand what are the biggest needs and how can we take the existing product that we have and then adapt them in an invisible way to serve all guests. And so our mission at Target is really to bring joy to all families. And so for us to be able to do that, we go through and we look at all of our pieces and we think about how can we make this more inclusive, not only from how it fits, but the graphics that we use, the fabrication, the price points. So we're really focusing on just accessibility and inclusion for all.
Amazing. And one point that you have all indirectly made is that you are going through this process with the population of people with disabilities by your side. And
Absolutely.
That is something that we can absolutely pull from our last panel discussion, that's exactly what the population wants and needs. So bravo certainly to all of you for really committing to that. Khadija, and first of all, it has been equally an honor to have been able to be side by side with you this whole journey. Did you have an aha moment as being such a seasoned technical designer, having been doing this for years and years, that was a personal kind of shift for you that helped you understand that you can really, through technical shifts, make a difference in the design for people with disabilities?
So Minnie, 1 in 5 globally live with a disability of something or the other, and the simple way of dressing is difficult for every day and can be a challenge to them. Through working with you as well as other researchers, we had come to a very wide space in which the market for stylish adapted clothing. We knew we could make a positive impact and changes. My personal aha moment was during our first children fashion show with Runway of Dreams, when a little girl named Joy was able to dress herself for the first time. She came running and hugged me and said, "I dressed myself," which not only brought tears to my eyes, Mindy, if you remember, it brought tears to everyone standing in that room, you know. So that was my touching moment, which changed a lot to me and was my haha moment. She was so thrilled and excited to be independent for the first time. The launch of Adaptive in US and globally shows that Tommy has moved so much ahead in this wide field where nobody had touched. So that was a really big thing. This demographic has been cared for, never been cared for before. And today, with your help of Runway of Dreams, we've been able to touch so many lives, Mindy, which is amazing. In the US, over 30% of our customer service calls were from people who thanked us. That is just to say thank you. It was just amazing, the amount of response we get every day from different customers just to say thank you for being there for us or for their family. Amazing how we can empower our consumers and help and foster independence and confidence in this community.
Thank you, Khadija. Judy, I know that you and I share that we go on this path personally and professionally, but from a professional perspective, did you have a moment either internally with Kohl's working with some of your members of your team, or an experience that really hit home for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because it is hard to untangle the personal and professional, and I would say this also hit me on both levels. So as Stacey said at Target, we also have a parenting group for families who have kids with special needs or disability, and I'm one of the co-leaders for that. So when we were starting to launch Adaptive, we knew we wanted to wear test extensively, so we partnered with our own Kohl's families. And I will say, you know, anyone who's interested in getting into Adaptive, you will have resources around you that you don't even know about. You know, there are so many families who do include somebody with a disability. And I think as you dig into this deeper, you'll find that, you know, we're everywhere and we're willing to help. So, so we really partnered with our parenting group, and during that wear testing time, it's really critical to get any type of feedback, positive, negative, be able to course correct on the fly before the launch. So that was a great partnership. And we started to hear some pretty amazing stories of what was happening with our own associates. One of our associates shared that her son could pull his pants up by himself for the first time because he could hook his fingers into the belt loops of his pants. Another associate shared that her son wore one of our hoodies that was focused around sensory sensitivities every single day, and she couldn't even get him to take it off to wash it. He loved it that much. We heard from also caregivers that tube feeding throughout the day was easier because of abdominal access in a bodysuit. So we knew right away what the impact of the product really was. And then once we launched, we also received so many letters and emails from our customers just letting us know really how much it means to them, and letting us know what their needs are. So yes, definitely a lot of feedback right away of how important adaptive clothing really is to people.
Thank you. Gina, I want to switch gears a little bit because this has been so exciting and amazing to be able to work with LVMH as representing, you know, the luxury side of the industry. And that's one thing that I really wanted to bring to the light of day in this discussion, that people with disabilities come in all different shapes, sizes, budget backgrounds, you name it. So from Target to LVMH, there are people with disabilities, and that is really important thing to outline, that people with disabilities are everywhere, and it is the one minority that is the biggest minority that each and every one of us are going to be a part of at some point in our life. It's a fact. So Gina, in dealing with all of kind of the houses that make up LVMH, have you found that this has been unifying in some way between, for example, the Sephora's and the Marc Jacobs, in terms of this being something that is unifying beauty and fashion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that because we tried to be, and again, we're not perfect, there's, you know, so much work ahead of us, but we've always tried to have this strong foundation around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've been very vocal in certain categories that I mentioned earlier. And so on the one hand, I would say that, you know, over 50% of our employees around the world are millennials. And we know that millennials are very aware, very enlightened, and very demanding of companies that they work for and that they patronize. And for an organization like ours that, you know, we see, you know, we're the largest luxury group in the world, there's an expectation that we bring something to the industry and that we're really on the forefront of creativity, innovation, design, and diversity and inclusion. So on the one hand, I would say there's a very large expectation from our employees that we are leaders in each of these areas. I think that until we started working together, again, the focus was very much on the employee experience and recruitment and providing job opportunities, which is extremely important. And that is something where we had a track record. But through the work that we've been doing with you, and I think most recently at the panel discussion, I mean, we had the opportunity this year to bring your virtual gala to our organization and disseminate that throughout North America, where we have 40,000 employees. And we also had, as you know, this amazing panel discussion with a number of your models, moderated by someone at Sephora. And that was an incredibly powerful moment for our employees to hear firsthand from potential customers what's important to them, what they're looking for, what's working, what's not working, what are their daily lives like. I think the one thing that I can really contribute and bring is sort of help and adjusting and evolving the culture, the way that we work, bringing awareness and understanding. And it's, for me, it really starts there. We had one employee, for example, from Louis Vuitton who participated in the panel, and she came to us afterwards and said, and she works in the US, she works on product, but because of the way we're structured, she's not working with design and merchandising in terms of actually creating the collections. She's basically sort of buying for the North American market. But she said that after that panel, she said, I don't think I can ever do my job the same way. Again, I can never look at my job in the same way as I understand the importance from this community. So it's changed the way she wants to be able to drive conversations with her colleagues in Paris. And that is something that Louis Vuitton is committed to. And in fact, we've also connected Louis Vuitton with, I know, Runway of Dreams and Gamut Management, and also Grace June, because it is something that they're really looking at. How can we also be a part of this, and how do we create this for our brand? So I think that we have to bring awareness. I think if you're not impacted on a personal level, it might not be something that you're thinking about. And so again, the number one thing I think we can do is bring awareness and understanding. And we have, fortunately, a group of very, I think, committed and dedicated and really passionate employees that once they learn, as you know, for example, that they just have to be able to make a change and have impact somehow. So I think these are the important discussions that we have to have and that we continue to have. They are really transformative, and this is how we change the conversation, because like every other brand, we're not different. Even if we're in a different sector, we are still fundamentally about delighting our customers, bringing them joy, some way to make them feel better, build confidence. And we want our brands, we want our marketing, we want our communications to reflect the communities and the world that we live in. That's really important to us. And it continues to be, critically important at the group level, all the brands around the world. And I think it is, we have the ability to really drive important changes, all of you have done. And so I think we're really excited and doing more and more work to continue to see how we can push the envelope and bring greater awareness on a worldwide basis.
That's beautiful. Yes, thank you, Gina, because I think it was so important to underscore that making movement happen internally is equally as important as externally. So again, the different entry points can be based on where the brands want to begin. So thank you for sharing that. Katisha, I do want to just talk briefly about, I remember when we first started, the impact that this actually had on the factories also, that you were working with and helping them understand how to work with magnets, create the modifications. I remember you sharing the impact that this had on the factory workers as well.
Right. So when we started this, and especially handling magnets was very difficult for the factories. They never knew how to stitch magnets in the machines, because the magnets would get caught on the plate. So every time they would move a shirt or pant forward with the magnets, the plate would stick to the magnet, and they didn't know how to work. So I traveled to literally all the factories that we were working with and spent a week there to figure out how they would do. For the first set of samples, we started putting cardboard on the plate and stitching the magnet so the magnet wouldn't stitch onto the stick into the plates, and they were able to move it. So that was the first run that we did. But then later on, we got the non-stick plates to help them to stitch the magnets, and that's what they're using currently. The other problem was that they couldn't figure out the positive and the negative of the magnet. So when they were stitching, they would put two positive together or two negative together. So when the sample came out, they wouldn't work the magnet. So we had to check every samples to make sure the positive and the negatives were put correct. So we started color coding it. So the negative would be red, the positive would be yellow, so that they would know easily that the positive and the negatives have to get together and how they need to be. So we went through a lot of training with these factories to get them today to where they are. And another problem with them was like, when we because we are washing a lot of garments before they come out, how do we put them in the machine and not get them stuck to the washer, the magnets? So my solution to them was that if we put them in a bag, the clothes in a bag, and then put it, so the magnetic force becomes less if they are closed, and they put in a bag, and then so they started washing it that way, and they was not getting stuck to the washing machines. So we had to come up with different solutions for the factories because they didn't know how to handle magnets. Velcro wasn't a problem. The hook and the loops wasn't a problem at all for them because they've been doing that for a long time, but the magnet was very tough. Some of the factories, only once they got on the journey with us and they realized how it's benefiting this community, that they agreed to go ahead with this mission. And today, every factory of ours is ready to do that for us. So it's amazing how they came along this journey with us. And today, literally all the factories that we work with are making those samples for us.
Amazing, thank you. And just want to reiterate on that, there are solutions. And Khadija and team and everybody on the panel, they are making it happen. So it can happen. Natalie, I want to make sure that I'm going to kind of fast forward a little bit, panel, because I want to make sure we have time for questions. But Natalie, I know that I receive tremendous amounts of email about footwear. I experience it in my own life with Oliver. It is really, really difficult for many people with disabilities. Talk to us a little bit about the design process of it. And I firsthand got to see you working with children with disabilities, but you saw a problem and you solved it by working with the population. But what was that process like? Just unmute yourself.
You know, the driving force behind this project were really the parents. You know, when we first started the project, I really didn't know where to begin. We didn't have webinars like this where people had open discussions, where we can gather information or know who to reach out to. It was really our survey that really changed everything for us. You know, as a brand, I felt like we had the 1,600 parents behind us willing to help. You know, they tried on our existing shoes. They tried out our prototypes, our second, third, fourth prototypes. They told us what we can do to make it better. You know, we had parents send us videos, commentaries, reviews, you know, all in the midst of COVID. Where we couldn't evaluate some of the shoes in person. You know, one of the things that was very surprising to me from the surveys were a lot of the adaptive features that our customers were asking for were either features that we currently had in some capacity on our shoes, or we had the ability and the resources to make it better. You know, the biggest pain points for a lot of parents, you know, whose children wear orthotics, you know, they want additional depth, you know, they want ease of entry and the ability to adjust the shoes to keep them on their child. So in our development process of the back and forth with the parents, it really pushed us to make our features more customizable so that it would fit, you know, it would fit great for a child with an orthotic or if a child had an extra wide foot. You know, the process for us, you know, going through it, and we're very new in this space, and, you know, that's why we're so honored to be here to share our story, is that I hope that other brands and designers understand that inclusive design It's not necessarily about creating the best adaptable shoe in this world, but it's really about, how do we make our #1 shoe, or, the shoe that feels like our brand, or something that comes from our brand identity. And, how do we make it reach a wider audience utilizing those adaptive features? I think many of us, all of us being in the fashion industry, it's a cyclical world where every season we're constantly bringing new products into the world. And, whether you're a designer or you're selling it or you're marketing it, we all have a hand in creating something that can really change someone's life by being able to give them just options. What we heard loud and clear from our survey was that these kids want options instead of the only functional default option, because that's the only version that works with their orthotics. So that's kind of been our start of our journey, and we're kind of on our way there. And everyone that's watching, everyone that has a hand in bringing products into this world can also be a part of that as well.
Thank you. That was so beautifully said. And I think that I can personally relate to that, because my son Oliver just wanted to wear the same jeans as everybody else. He didn't want to wear special jeans. And through modification, I was able to provide that for him, but everybody should have that opportunity, as you so beautifully said. I'm going to ask one last question, then we're going to open it up to the audience. Stacey, this is for you, because this is something that I wanted to bring forward from our last panel, and that is the notion of, if you don't see it, you cannot dream it. And I think that is so profound and so important. And Target really had a very viral moment with that, specifically in that a campaign, an ad that you had in store of a young man who happened to be a gamut model, was very big, very pronounced in a Target store. He is in a wheelchair, and another little boy who was in a wheelchair was photographed looking up at that image, and it went beyond viral. Just to have that feeling of seeing somebody that looked like you. What was that impact on, from Target, or even you personally?
I think we take for granted a lot of times how we see ourselves on a daily basis in media, whether it's through social media, TV, runway, ads, billboards, fashion shows. But I think what really struck me, and obviously struck a chord with the community, is perhaps this was the first time that Oliver saw somebody that looked like him in a different environment. It wasn't a hospital, it wasn't a therapy session, it was in Target. And so I think that is so incredibly powerful. Representation is so incredibly important, yet so underrated when it comes to the disability community. And what I mean by that is that, as designers and in the fashion industry, we look at influencers, we look at runway, and it's about creating this ideal beauty, this ideal image. But concurrently, if we look at how incredibly important it is to then use that same image, those same inspirational moments for people living with disabilities, or people that are different race, ethnicities, different body shapes and sizes, like that is something powerful, that you belong and that you create a sense of community. And this is the time that we need to start being really intentional and really thoughtful about that. And how can we change that narrative going forward? And then I would also add to what is so incredibly beautiful about that moment too, is it's starting the conversation about disability. It's a conversation about people who look different, and that's okay, and why. Historically, I don't think people talk about disabilities is because they don't want to say the wrong thing and offend somebody. But if you come from a place of good and you're asking the questions because you want to learn, what an incredibly powerful dialogue to take us into the future.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Because speaking of dialogue, we are going to open it up to our audience. And I really encourage people to talk of, ask the questions. Look how fabulous. We have 6 major brands together on this mission. As an industry, we can do this and we can do it together. So hit us. Sasha?
Well, thank you, everyone. We have tons of questions submitted. I'm going to try and get through as many as we can. So the first one I want to ask to the group, and this is open to anyone to answer. When you're presenting ideas for adaptive fashion to others in your company who might not have that personal connection or tie to this particular community, how do you relay the importance to invest in adaptive fashion while knowing there is a higher cost for product development? So really, how do you relay the importance to others who don't have that connection to this community?
I can take that one. So how we started this was really creating a business plan. Like, what are your statistics? What's the population? What is the dollar available? So we heard conflicting figures, 500 billion, 5 trillion. We know there's a huge market share out there for clothing. So start with that. And then second of all, it's about just sharing guest stories, sharing photos, sharing YouTube videos, clips, bringing people in who are willing to share their stories. Because education is incredibly powerful. You can't expect somebody to understand or know if they haven't had that life experience. So it's up to us who have those resources and have that knowledge to open that dialogue and to make it a safe space.
And Sasha, that was so perfect, Stacey. I'm just gonna add one more thing, that thank you to whoever asked that, because that's really, really important to getting this started. Please tune in to next week's panel discussion, because we will be talking to the top researchers on the why, the data, the hard numbers of why adaptive, and that can certainly help with, as Stacey said, the business plan of it.
Great. So the next question is, there are so many needs to address through clothing, shoes, accessories. How as a brand do you choose or prioritize certain needs? This person who's asking the question wants to help everyone, as we all probably in our heart would want to, but wants to be realistic about approaching mass production of clothing. So where does one begin? And someone else's question I want to tack on to that is there like a white space that maybe hasn't been touched yet?
I can talk about this because I think when we had our first focus group, there were so many needs, and that's the exact question that we asked ourselves, like, where do we start? And so we started where we could manage it, like where we could start. So we started, in apparel. We started with versions of the clothing that we are offering in our core line. And we knew there were some things we couldn't do right away. I think one thing that we learned was that if you try to do too many things in one garment and serve too many customers, it's confusing to the customer. They may not understand what all the features are for, and they may end up feeling like it's not as much for them as we had wanted it to be. So I would say listen to your customers, start where you have access to knowledge, like real knowledge of working with somebody who has the issue that you're trying to solve, and partnering with them. I think it's definitely a kind of a two-way partnership as you're developing that product. But I would say starting small and starting focused and really putting a lot of thought into the product that you're doing would be a great place to start, and then build out from there.
I'd like to add on to that as well, to what Judy said. I think what we've learned working with some of the brands that are open to having the conversation is sometimes it's just the smallest modification that all of a sudden it opens up the door for the product to be more accessible to everyone. And so I think from a universal design perspective, that's one way where you can look at that and know that, again, I think some of the designers were really surprised that just small tweaks could really go a long way. And so you're able to serve more people with that product.
I would
Thank
also,
you.
I would add
Go ahead.
to that. Oh, I'm sorry. I would also add to that there's so many needs out there, and one brand is going to be able to cater to it. So that's what I think is so beautiful about this webinar and the attendees is, how do you take your brand, your knowledge, and create something different? We, again, have the ability to be able to go shop wherever it is that we want to shop to reflect our personality. A lot of times people don't have that option. So how do we create that space for more, options that are adaptive and a different style and aesthetic?
Thanks, Stacey. I love this next question. It's coming, I think, from a student. So they're interested in understanding that if you want to get into inclusive apparel design, as a designer, what experiences, trait, or skills do you need to have or develop to either work for your respective companies or to start your own?
I'll start that, and I'm sure everybody will weigh in. But I often like to say there is really not a designer on this planet, myself included, who can design for people with disabilities without including people with disabilities in every step of the process. So I would say the first and most important skill is know your target audience and work with them.
I can add to that. I mean, we have a lot of designers and technical designers who are very passionate about this product, but they don't necessarily have prior knowledge about it. I think it's just the very nature of having a passion for it that drives the learning. So a lot of our teams get involved, outside of work with different groups, whether it's playing, wheelchair basketball or doing outings or, attending different seminars and webinars and whatnot and reaching out. I think it's just anytime someone is engaged and really excited about something, they kind of propel themselves forward to learn about it. And I've seen that, and it's really remarkable to watch how passionate so many of our team members really are about this, and they're teaching themselves. Like, we're teaching ourselves as we go.
Wonderful. So the next question is a really important one, and it's not necessarily about design and what we, as our community of the Council of Fashion Designers of America are here to talk about, but I think it's so important. So what initiatives are your companies taking on regarding the employment of people with disabilities on front-facing roles such as sales, marketing, management positions? People with disabilities have a strong desire to directly relate to those who have similar life experiences in customer-facing positions.
Well, I'm happy to touch on it, although I will say that right now it's been very focused. There have been some headquarter positions in Paris where we have focused on disability, on recruiting people with disabilities, which is also a good place to start. And many of times those can absolutely be client facing on the customer service side, which has been another important area for us and some of our brands. And then, as we said, within Sephora, within the distribution center, which, by the way, wasn't a fait accompli, it wasn't a given, because there was a feeling sometimes that this was a very unsafe environment for people with disabilities, particularly if you are deaf or if you have eyesight impairment, because you could be putting yourself or others at danger. And we've really been able to disprove that by, first of all, of course, making adjustments, making edits, creating a safe environment, educating and training well the individuals that are taking the roles, but also educating and training well the colleagues that will be working with those individuals. And I think it's actually the same rules apply to what we're talking about on the design side. And with any community that you're trying to address, you need to engage those communities in the process. You need to understand from them what's important to them, what are they looking for, what do they need around them for support. I think a lot of times companies have, part of the reason that we started doing gender diversity, and that became such a critical mission for us, and that was our first pillar, was because we had, this was in 2007, we were a company that was predominantly targeting women, and yet we had predominantly men making decisions in terms of clothing, in terms of beauty, in terms of what women wanted. And that was just crazy. I mean, how is it that these men are going to be making decisions about cosmetics and fragrances and apparel for women? So I think, you know, we knew that we needed to change that so that we had the voice of women that could really serve our customers. And it's the same rules that apply. And I would say it's the same rules that apply on the business side. If you really want to engage those populations from a workforce, you need to have focus groups. You need to discuss with them. You need to work with organizations that have a successful track record and understand what it is that you need to set up the organization to ensure that they're able to be successful. But all the rules apply. And this is why it goes back to having truly a diverse organization, because in order to reflect the customer and the employee and the world we live in, you have to have the voice of those individuals contributing to the solutions.
Yeah.
Well said.
Thank you, Gina. So I think we have time for one last question. And this comes from someone who joined us last week. So thank you for continuing on in this journey with us. In last week's webinar, many of our guests mentioned how much they love fashion and how important their style identity was to them. They also discussed how it was challenging for them to find clothes that kind of met their adaptive needs, but were also stylish. Would you say it is more tricky to consider the factor of style when creating adaptive fashion? Is it approached differently? Open to anyone.
I have a pretty quick answer for that one. I would say our philosophy has been to offer the same product. So, you know, especially with kids who want to dress like their peers, we want them to have the same graphics, the same fabrics, the same colors, have something fresh every season. So we've taken an approach of giving an adapted version of the core product that we're already offering. So that's kind of how we've approached that. So I guess my answer would be that it's not much different, and we're not, you know, excluding anybody from the changes in the season and the fashions that, you know, we're offering.
I would agree with that as well. I think it's what about the trend, what about the style, and then how do you add those modifications and adaptations, but do it in such a way that it's invisible and you can't tell that it's adaptive. So then ultimately, then that makes it more universal design. So again, that's why it's so incredibly important to connect with your community to really understand what is happening. And then also through this like education moment, the people on your team start learning more about what is happening, then can connect with another team and another team. And so for Target, what started out as a small insular group of people has grown to 35 to 60 to now 100 to now going from apparel to now offering home goods. So it just continues to expand, but that's still that same philosophy of what is that trend item and how do you do that adaptation invisibly.
Agreed. And I think it's also really important to, and we spoke about this last week, that to rethink how things are done. Just because they have been done like that doesn't mean we can't think about the better way to do it. I'm going to repeat it, but the button and buttonhole was invented in the 13th century. The fact that we are still using that technology is bananas. We can do better. We can marry technology. We can rethink the way that things are done to expand our customer base.
I'd also say there's a lot of very interesting things going on with trim suppliers. So, you know, as there are new innovations, and, you know, there's zippers that magnetic latch, and I think those are on some garments already. And, you know, we get really excited when we meet with our trim suppliers and we hear what's happening in the industry. And as this all propels forward, it can also allow us to include, you know, something better than a button, you know, into the designs and things we're doing. So that's always exciting as well.
Thanks, Judy. Well, I know I can speak for a lot of people who submitted their comments and questions that were truly inspired by your leadership in this industry and all the hard work you've all put in to adaptive fashion and working with people with disabilities. So I can't thank our group of experts enough for joining us today. So Mindy, Khatija, Judy, Stacey, Gina, Natalie, and Dana, thank you so much for being a part of this important conversation. And I hope that everyone's joining us today will be able to tune in for next week's conversation with all of our researchers and be part of that conversation with us again. So thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you to the
Thank you so
CFDA
much.
and this
Thank you.
magnificent panel.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.